All right, welcome in everybody here to the flagship football show brought to you by the Rebel Walk, where we are positively Ole Miss. I'm Jake Evans, and today I am running solo. Land Teller is being held hostage by his GPA, and Michael Spears, our third co-host slash baseball manager, is called into action today. The Rebels play Jackson State here in a couple hours, and he is already at the field getting ready for hopefully another big Rebel victory. So to start it off here today, if you're listening on Spotify or Apple, please drop a 5-star review for the flagship football show. Show your support and tell us how much you love us. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe to the Rebel Walk's YouTube channel. And then while you're at it, follow the Rebel Walk and the Flagship Football Show on Twitter and Facebook to stay up to date with all your Ole Miss news. We also want to give a shout out to Mark Rogers, the voice of college football. Check Mark out on Twitter and YouTube, and you'll be able to find all your college football news from across the country all in one place there with Mark's channel. So welcome in, everybody. Again, it's a beautiful day in Oxford, Mississippi. The reason that I'm sitting outside doing the show today, it's too pretty to pass up. And the biggest news out of Mississippi in the last 24 hours has nothing to do with the Rebels' 2-possession victory over Memphis last night in baseball, but has to do with Governor Tate Reeves' last press conference and his last update. He announced yesterday afternoon that effectively all restrictions in Mississippi have been lifted regarding COVID-19. Announced yesterday that all mask mandates are being pulled, and that he is encouraging businesses to open back at 100% capacity as soon as possible. So that's obviously huge news. Mississippi and Texas are the two first states to do that. Kind of ushering in this new era of seeing what life's going to be like after COVID. Obviously, most people are anxious to see how obviously that'll play out in daily life, but also very anxious to see how that's going to play out in regards to sports. Ole Miss this year, as we all know, we had capacity at football games, 10% capacity inside the pavilion this year for basketball games, and probably about a 10% capacity at Swayze Field for the first couple of weeks of the season here. So moving forward, it's going to be very interesting to see what Keith Carter does with the new plan to open Swayze back up. Obviously, this news comes on the tail end of basketball season with only one game left on Saturday. Rebels notched a big victory last night over Kentucky, a struggling Kentucky team, but nevertheless Kentucky, one of the blue bloods of college basketball, and we'll jump into that in a minute. But like I said, the biggest news right now has to do with that. Once Swayze is once the restrictions are lifted and the plans have been worked out for opening back at full capacity, it'll be a very big help for the Rebels. That's something, we talked about it a couple weeks ago on the show. Swayze Field is one of the best atmospheres in all of college baseball. That there's no secret there. And the Rebels being able to play in front of a full crowd there is something that really, really plays into their advantage. Obviously, everybody knows about, right field showers, throw it in the dirt, all that good stuff. And those are all things that really do, I would imagine, help the Rebels quite a bit. The first couple games here at home have been, bleak attendance because of the restrictions. I was actually at the game last night against Memphis, and, it's tough to see. We're used to seeing 8,000 to 10,000 people there at every single game. SEC weekends packed out, and really and truly some of these midweek games packed out too. And so it was nice to hear that announcement. Obviously, there's a lot of people concerned about what that means going forward. But it's going to be a nice step forward to see fans back in Swayze, fans back in the pavilion for Saturday night, hopefully against Vanderbilt in basketball. And going forward, it's just going to be interesting to see how this all plays out because, as we know, the last year or so, this has been the new normal. Reduced capacities, masks, social distancing, everything like that. So, moving forward, Keith Carter has said that his staff and the administration are going to move towards making plans to adjust to these new, lack of restrictions as quickly as possible. He said that the restrictions are still going to be in place for tonight's game versus Jackson State. However, they're looking to make these adjustments to the game day policies as quickly as possible. So it's going to be a very exciting next couple of weeks and months for Rebel fans as they get to watch watch their team unrestricted and back in real action. So, yeah, as I said, that's the biggest news to come out of Mississippi in the last few days. And so, as Rebel fans, we're all very happy to hear that we could, that we'll be able to pack Swayze here pretty soon. But first thing we want to do on the show here today, or I guess not first thing I want to do here on the show today, we're going to jump into basketball. Basketball, as of the last couple of weeks, everybody knows they hit the hot streak, beating, Missouri and Tennessee, 2 top 10 teams in 3 games. They carried a nice 4-game win streak through that little, couple of weeks there. And then a postponement versus LSU effectively kind of ended that. Rebels bounced back and played an awful game against Mississippi State at home, lost 66-56. That didn't count the Rebels out for sure, but it definitely made their path to the tournament a lot harder. They bounced back with another win over Missouri, a 24th ranked Missouri at the time, who had started to skid after the Rebels beat them. But then last Saturday, the Rebels slipped up again. They went to Nashville and lost to a pretty bad Vanderbilt team, 75-70. And that's who the Rebels will play again this week on Saturday. That was their game that was added. And so the Rebels will get to see this Vanderbilt team again for their last game of the season before the SEC tournament, looking to push to 15-10 overall. But the first thing I want to hit today is the Rebels' big win. Obviously, Kentucky is not great this year. They've had a very down year. This is not a Calipari-esque team. This is not what we're used to seeing out of Kentucky basketball, as they're sitting at 8-15 right now in the year with a 7-9 conference record. But nevertheless, the Rebels get a huge win. It was a big night. They needed to win. If there was any chance for the Rebels to make the tournament from this point moving forward, they had to show up and show out last night, and they did. As I said, it was a 70-62 win in the Pavilion last night. Devontae Shuler led the way. Once again, he's been great for most of this season, and this team has kind of lived and died with his better games and with his bad games. 17 points for him. He added 7 assists and 3 rebounds. Shot 6 of 10 from the field and hit all 3 of the 3-pointers that he attempted on the night. So great game from Devontae Shuler. That kind of 15 to 21 point range is where we've come to expect Devontae Shuler. And that's really where the Rebels have played their best basketball, is when he's consistently sitting around that 17-point mark. So that was great to see him last night, showed up and really kind of ushered the team through this game. KJ Buffin had a monster night behind him, 16 points, 10 rebounds on 5 of 8 shooting. Romello White, another big game for him. He's been a real stalwart for the Rebels down low, grabbing rebounds this year. When he's been getting rebounds, the Rebels have done well. When he's struggled down there on the glass, it's been tough for the Rebels. And so last night he had a double-double, 11 points, 10 rebounds. Great game for him. Sammy Hunter also stepped up in some limited minutes. He's been off and on for the Rebels this year, and really hasn't played a huge part in this offense throughout the year, but stepped up huge last night. Hit 3 3-pointers last night for a total of 11 points. Overall, the Rebels shot the ball very well last night. That was kind of the story of the game for them. 61.5% from behind the arc. They hit 8 of 13 threes, shot 46% from the field, and hit 16 of 19 free throws, which was something that's been very crucial for the Rebs this year. There's been a lot of games where they've shot the ball very poorly from the free throw line, and have also in turn given up a lot of free throws. That was not the case last night. The Rebels, they really shot the ball well, like I said, overall throughout the game. They out-rebounded Kentucky 42-28, which has been another key stat in some of these big wins, is seeing the Rebels out-rebounding teams. And as I said, KJ Buffin and Romello White were both a huge part of that. Kentucky, on the other hand, did not shoot the ball nearly as well. They shot 25% from behind the arc, 60% from the free throw line, and only 37% from the field. So, as I said, again, it was a story of solid offense, effective, efficient shooting from the Rebels, and then poor offense on the side of Kentucky. The Rebels, the game was pretty close throughout. The Rebels kind of danced around with Kentucky. They had a lead. They kind of gave it up at times. But with about 10 minutes to go in the second half, they took the lead and they kind of marched it up from there and never looked back. It was a good game all around. As I said, this was a Kentucky team that's definitely, a shell of the Kentucky teams we're used to seeing. There's still a lot of talent on the floor for Kentucky, but, this year, if you've watched any Kentucky basketball, you can just tell that it's not meshing. It's not what we're used to seeing. There's not a clear leader on this team. There's not there's no older leaders there, and we're not used to seeing a ton of that with Kentucky teams because, everybody knows how they go one and done a lot of times. But as I said, this is a Kentucky team that's really struggled. But nevertheless, it was a big win for the Rebels. As I said, they really had to have this one if they want any chance to make the tournament. And so yeah, it was a big one. Looking forward, as I said, we play Vanderbilt Saturday night. Vanderbilt comes to the Pavilion for the Rebels' final game of the regular season. That'll be a big one right there. As I said, trying to get to 15-10 going into the SEC tournament. If really at this point, it looks bleak for the Rebels. After the loss to Mississippi State, it was in question, but still possible. But after the loss to Vanderbilt, it seems all but over, because that Vanderbilt game was really a shot to the Rebels. Strong wins. They had a couple of quadrant wins against the Tennessees and Missouris. But a loss to a bad Mississippi State team and a loss to a bad Vanderbilt team really are going to knock that resume down more than those Tennessee and Missouri wins will boost it. So that's kind of where we sit with the Rebels right now. It's like I said, it's kind of bleak. They're going to need to go to the SEC tournament and most likely win the whole thing if they want to if they want to move on. The only possibility that I see that could get the Rebels into the tournament without them winning the SEC would be if they were able to beat a team like Alabama. They're at the top of the SEC this year. I believe they're top 5 at the moment. They've been phenomenal all year. That's a team that's just continued to climb and climb and climb. And it's been good for them that this Kentucky team's been down, because, a lot of times that's the team that the SEC has to go through. And so, like I said, as we look forward here to the next week, it doesn't look great for the Rebels. However, you never really know. The Rebels won the SEC before as an underdog, and it can happen again. But, we'd probably expect to see Alabama come out of the SEC this year, despite a pretty weak SEC field behind that. So basketball, I wouldn't count them all the way, this being the end of it. And so, a Vanderbilt win on Saturday night is absolutely imperative. If the Rebels slip up again, it's over no matter what. So yeah, Rebels, they've had an up and down season. There was a lot of promise for this team, a lot of hype. And we really expected a little bit more out of this team. They showed up and they played some really, really good basketball at times. But they also slipped up, like we talked about. They've slipped up too many times and against some pretty bad teams on paper, which is really just going to be kind of the death of them this year, I would say. So next, we're going to move into some baseball next. That's obviously the news that everybody's waiting on right now, that everybody's kind of, wanting to hear. The Rebels right now are, as we all know, after the State Farm Showdown, the Rebels had a great 3-game series, beat 3 top 10 Texas teams, and came out the other side number 1. It was short-lived, though. It was short-lived, as we all know. The Rebels lost 2 of 3 last weekend to UCF. And really, the story of the weekend was kind of just the Rebels struggling at the plate. They had 24 hits across 3 games compared to UCF's 28, which that stat right there doesn't exactly scream, 2 losses and poor offense, but the problem was the Rebels couldn't string them together. They couldn't put hits together when they needed to. They get men on and leave men on base. Really they couldn't help out. They couldn't help out their starting pitching. The Rebels also struck out 29 times over those 3 games, which was a number that we were definitely not expecting to see, to say the least. This is a Rebel team that hit the ball very, very well in the State Farm Showdown. And then, to come home like this and kind of lay an egg against a weaker UCF team, that was definitely something that we were not expecting to see. On Friday night, Doug Nikhazy got the ball again as the ace this year. He threw 6 1/3, threw the ball pretty well, gave up 2 runs, struck out 9 batters. But like I said, he just didn't get any offensive help. And led to the Rebels losing that night. Came back the next day, had a doubleheader on Saturday afternoon. Gunnar Hoglund took the first half of it in the game that the Rebels won. He struck out 10, continued to look dominant, continued to look very, very good on the mound. And really, the 2 times that he's pitched this year, he's been in control. And that's something that's huge to see this year because, even though Doug Nikhazy hasn't gotten a win yet, even though Derek Diamond lost in Game 3 of this UCF series, the pitching has still been pretty solid. It's just been, as I said, needing offense to help, aid that pitching. Over the 3 games, as I said, Nikhazy struck out 9, Gunnar Hoglund struck out 10 in Game 2, and then Derek Diamond struck out 9 in Game 3. However, he gave up a handful of runs, and ultimately the as I said, the Rebels were, they weren't able to close out the series. They ended up losing 2 of 3 to UCF, dropping them to, I believe, number 6, where they're currently sitting, which I think is a pretty accurate representation of this team right now. Obviously, we all saw in the State Farm Showdown, Peyton Chatagnier, he was kind of the MVP of the week, won SEC Player of the Week, had a fantastic offensive and defensive weekend there, but suffered an injury, suffered a hamstring injury, I believe, and we still have not seen him back. We've seen TJ McCants, the freshman out of Pensacola, play a lot in his absence so far, and he's played well. He's hit the ball well, played some good defense in the field, and that's a guy that really and truly would be starting at almost every other Division I school. He's an absolute stud of a player, and funny enough, actually, his brother is committed to play at Mississippi State next year. So that'll be that McCants family rivalry will be a fun one to look out for in the next couple of years. But we expect TJ McCants to be a big time player for the Rebels here for the next few years. So enough of the UCF series. That was obviously, like we talked about, it was a slip up. Rebels really just. They didn't put their best foot forward, to say the least. Couldn't string together the hits when they needed to, and when they did, it was too little, too late. And that was kind of the story of the weekend. So Rebels lose 2 of 3 to UCF, but they bounce back on Tuesday night with a huge 16-4 win over Memphis. Drew McDaniel made his second start of the year, another midweek start, and got a second win through 4 innings, and looked really good. He was great last week for the Rebels. He was good again tonight or last night. And that's a guy that I think the Rebels are going to continue to lean on in these midweek games, so that they can keep the Nikhazy, Hoglund, Diamond trio, ready for the weekends. So Drew McDaniel throws the ball really well. Jackson Kimbrell and Greer Holston come in and finish the last 5 innings of the game. They throw a perfect 5 innings to close out the game. At one point in this game, though, Memphis scored 3 runs in the first 2 innings. There was a couple of errors, a pair of errors by the Rebels. Got Memphis a couple of runs early. And as I said, I was there and I was sitting in the outfield, just thinking, man, this can't be happening again. But as I said, I think that was kind of the same sentiment that was in the dugout. This can't happen again. Rebels bounce back in the 3rd innings and put a 6 spot on Memphis to extend that lead to 10-3. And from there, obviously it didn't get any better. The Rebels scored in every inning but the 7th. That was a thing that was huge to see. Was as I talked about in that UCF series, the trouble was piecing together hits, consistent offense, and doing it when it mattered most. And thankfully the Rebels were able to do that last night. Obviously Memphis is a weaker team than the Rebels will be facing for most of this year, but still it's baseball. At any point, if you can get the bats going, it doesn't matter who it's against, it's welcomed. And so that was huge. That was huge last night. One of the things I wanted to mention too right now is that obviously, as I said, Peyton Chatagnier was fantastic in the State Farm Showdown, won SEC Player of the Week, all that. He was great. That was a guy that the Rebels were looking at as going to be a leader for this team, and he still is, and he still will be when he comes back. But in his absence in the last handful of games, Justin Bench has been absolutely phenomenal. Justin Bench and Jacob Gonzalez. Justin Bench over the last 4 games, hitting .533 with 8 hits, 5 runs, 7 RBI, a double, a triple, and a home run. And last night had 5 RBIs, a career high. He's been phenomenal. That's a guy right there that, I would say wasn't necessarily expected to be a huge offensive weapon for the Rebels this year. If you just kind of look at the numbers and you go by, the way I guess you expect baseball to traditionally go, you expect guys like Cale Baker, Ben Van Cleve, Tim Elko, Kevin Graham, maybe a Chatagnier. You expect those to be your big hitters that are your clutch hitters, driving in most of your runs. And it's because of that, it's been great to see a young Jacob Gonzalez and a Justin Bench who's come back this year and is starting now. Those are 2 guys that are going to be crucial. Those are 2 guys that if they can play good defense, can stay healthy, they probably will be in the lineup every single game this year. With the exception of, I guess, a couple of midweek resting games. But yeah, as I said, Justin Bench has been phenomenal over the last few games. Gonzalez on the year is hitting .303 with 10 hits, 6 RBIs, 7 runs, and a home run. That's a guy right there that, as we've talked about, the Rebels pulled him from California, one of the top shortstops in the country in the recruiting class or in the recruiting cycle last year. And he's been great right off of the bat. He made a top 10 play in Arlington in the State Farm Showdown at shortstop. So hit the ball very well, had his first home run of his career in that weekend, and he really hasn't slowed down since. He's been a great bat for the Rebels. He's been a good piece anywhere from that 1 to 3 spot in the lineup. He's bounced around, and he's really delivered wherever he's been, which is, it all starts. It all starts with, good offense up front, and then, guys like him playing good defense in the field. So last night was a great game, great bounce back game for the Rebels, one that they absolutely had to have. I don't think many of us are worried that this Rebel team is going to, start consistently losing midweek non-conferences. I don't think we expect this team to really ever drop out of the top probably 15 or 20, because really and truly, this is one of the best teams in the country. However, like we've talked about before, it's baseball. Sometimes you run into a good arm. You're not hitting the ball well that night. Guy hits a grand slam, something like that. It's just baseball is one of those finicky sports where the best team doesn't always win. That's kind of why, after losing 2 of 3 to a non-conference opponent in UCF, the Rebels only dropped 5 spots. If an Alabama at number 1 in football lost to an unranked UCF team, you'd expect them to drop 10, 15, maybe even 20 spot, something like that. They would drop off hard. But that's just not the case in baseball. There's a lot more baseball to be played, a heck of a lot more baseball, 50-plus games left to be played. And so, really and truly, these 2 UCF wins or losses don't bother me all that much. There's a lot of time to bounce back. The Rebels have still showed good signs of good offense, obviously, like in the Memphis game last night. And the pitching has been outstanding. As I said, relief through 5 perfect innings last night. Doug Nikhazy, Gunnar Hoagland, and Derek Diamond, even though they haven't, won all of their starts yet, they've all been very good. They've all thrown the ball pretty well. Doug Nikhazy obviously struggled in Game 1 in the State Farm Showdown, but that's pitching. That's pitching. That's life against top 10, top 5 teams. Sometimes your best stuff just isn't good enough that day. And that's the reality of baseball. And that's kind of what this all boils down to, is that sometimes your best just isn't enough. And last weekend, UCF put their best foot forward, and the Rebels just weren't able to match it. But last night, obviously, as I said, a 16-4 win, huge for the Rebels. They face Jackson State tonight, and then Belmont comes to Oxford for a 3-game series Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. You would expect all 4 of those to be wins. You would hope all 4 of those are going to be wins, because if any of those are a loss, then, we're having a different conversation, and we might be looking at the Rebels. The Rebels might be looking at the top 10 from the outside. And so this weekend is huge. The Rebels need to, they need to continue to hit the ball well like they did last night. They need to help their pitchers out, get good offense early on in the game, and really just kind of take these games by storm, because the longer you mess around with average teams, with bad teams, it tends to not work out in your favor when it comes to baseball. It just tends to not go well, when you don't put teams away when you have the chance. So as I said, the Rebels playing Jackson State tonight at 6:30, 3-game series with Belmont this weekend, and then going to next week, Rebels will have Alcorn State at home on Tuesday night, and then a 3-game series against Louisiana Monroe next weekend. So, looking forward, like we said, we expected most of these non-conference games to be wins for the Rebels. Obviously, 2 of them have already turned into losses, but looking forward, we really don't expect to see the Rebels, dropping any more of these games. Maybe 1 here or there, but overall, the Rebels are the better team, compared to the rest of the schedule, for the next at least 2 weeks. So, we'd expect to see some good baseball. I'd expect to see Doug Nikhazy and Gunnar Hoagland really continue to ramp up their performances. Derek Diamond, even he threw the ball well, but gave up runs the other night. I don't see any problem with him. He's pitched the ball well this year. Really and truly, this rotation is one of the best in college baseball. I don't expect that to go any different. I don't expect any change in that looking forward. So as I said, Rebel basketball looking tough right now. It's not a good time to be an Ole Miss basketball fan, because the outlook is pretty bleak at this point. But you never know. You really don't ever know. They have to win Saturday against Vanderbilt to have a chance. And on the other side, baseball needs to win their next 4 games. They need to win all 5 that they play this week, and they really need to not for the rankings, not for the media, not for anybody else. They just need to they need to win these games to prove to themselves, hey, we are one of the best teams in college baseball. Those were fluke losses to UCF. That's not who we are. We're better than that. And that's not something that'll be continued to, that's not something that'll continue to repeat. So, I really think that these games are important, not for us, but for them, because baseball is a confidence game. It really is. And if you're not confident in what you've got, if you're not confident in your bat, the ball is going to find you. It's going to find you, and it's going to expose you. That's just how baseball works. If you don't want the ball in the field, you're going to get it at least 5 or 6 times a game. That's just how baseball tends to work. The ball finds the people that don't want it. Balls, find bats that can't hit. And moving forward, the Rebels just need to bring that confidence back to say, hey, we are one of the best teams. Those were flukes, as I said. So I want to thank everybody for tuning in today. That was we got just a quick hitter show for this week. As I said, we've got a lot of scheduling conflicts here. And so, we might be looking more of a format like this moving forward. But yeah, continue to tune in every week. We'll have at least one episode, and probably some instant reaction shows coming after some of these baseball games in the next few weeks and months. So as I said before, subscribe to the Rebel Walk and the Flagship Football Show on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, the whole 9 yards. Show your support. Drop us a 5-star review on Apple and Spotify. Just stay positive. Nothing that's happened right now is unfixable. This is all. This is all too early on to call. It's too early to say that this Rebel team is a bust or that they're underperforming or anything like that. Hold your horses. It's going to be all right. This is a good baseball team, and this could be an Omaha year. This is one of the better, more talented teams that we've seen in Oxford in the last handful of years. And if there's ever a team that's going to make it to Omaha, it's going to be this one. As far as basketball making it to the tournament, probably not at this point, but that's just life. We haven't been a basketball school for a while now. Maybe we will in a couple years. We've got good recruits coming in, and give Kermit some time. Give him some time. This was a weird year for everybody. Brush it off. The Rebels will be okay. So again, thank you everybody for tuning in today. From all of us here at the Flagship Football Show and the Rebel Walk, we want to thank you for your support, your continued support, past, present, future, everything. For everybody over here, I'm Jake Evans, signing off.